Hello guys, welcome back to my channel and enjoy this fanfic part 2. Now let's start the fanfic. It was near dusk, as the orange and blue sky hung above them with a small stretch of pink in the middle as Naruto returned to his luxury penthouse in the shinobi housing sector of Konoha. Setsuna and Hitomi arrived a few minutes later, groceries in their hands as they set the bag down on the wood table. Hitomi had promptly ripped apart one, spilling out its contents of sweets and of the like, grabbed a handful and made her way to the large couch and flip on the TV. Setsuna had put a majority of the things in the fridge before telling Naruto she had to take a bath, before being kissed on the cheek again. With a blush, she quickly made her way towards the bathroom. Naruto sighed. Today was a long day, not to mention that he noticed Naomi peering at him from behind the tree in the park today at the last minute. It struck him as curious, but decided to drop it. He was tired, especially in the marketplace today when Hitomi basically drained the sweets shop dry of its confections. His wallet took a hit today, and he'll have to work overtime at Ichiraku's to make up the money. But, alas, he could never be mad at Hitomi. She was his precious Imouto after all. After strategically placing everything in the fridge, Naruto sat next to Hitomi, who was now sporting a spaghetti strap dress with cute pink flowers with smiley faces on it. The minute she felt the change of shape on the couch, she scrambled onto Naruto's lap and laid her head against his chest, smiling cheekily up at him. Naruto smiled and rested his chin atop of her head while watching TV. Setsuna soon came out, wearing a white dress shirt that did her bust no justice, and short black jeans, showing her well-toned legs with an adorable set of white bunny slippers. Naruto could faintly hear a yes from inside his head. Raising an eyebrow, Setsuna blushed before lightly slapping his forearm, sinking into the couch next to him and flipped open a magazine. It was an average day for Naruto, and he was content. He stealthily slid his hand under Setsuna's as he rubbed his thumb over it, making her blush as she flipped the page in her magazine. She didn't remove her hand. Instead, she tightened her grip, however minuscule it is, around Naruto's. Life was good. No sooner than 5 minutes, a knocking came from the door. Setting Hitomi aside, much to her protests, and releasing his hand from his butler, much to her silent protest, he made his way to the door. Peering through the peephole, he saw a raven-haired woman smiling, holding what looks like a leather shopping bag with the Uchiha crest, waving her free hand. Just a minute, he called out, before punching out a few buttons on a pad. The face scanner quickly scanned the woman's face before there was a beep, and the door opened. Makoto paraded in and lifted both her arms in the air, exuding her presence to those present. "Ohio, Naruto-chan," Makoto said jovially, before wrapping Naruto in a firm hug. It didn't help that he was suffocating in her bust, as he tried to pry the affectionate mother off his person. Makoto only tightened her grip as she pulled Naruto up to her eye level, nuzzling his cheek. Naru-chan, I just love your struggle snuggle," she said happily. On the opposite side of the room, Hitomi whimpered at the loss of her Oni-chan, who looked like he was about to have a broken spine. Setsuna sent a small glare towards Makoto, biting her nail in a vicious vice, before schooling her features. Relax, remain calm, neutral face, upright posture, cool and collected. She thought to herself, remembering what was drilled into her. She was a butler, and butlers were supposed to be the epitome of professionalism, the best of the. "Oni-chan, why is that lady kissing Oni-chan's face?" Hitomi asked, snapping her out of her thoughts. "What? Ooh, she's gonna get it." Setsuna was about to scramble off the couch, before Naruto managed to squirm out of Makoto's grasp. "Makoto Bakken, I'm 12 years old now. I'm a big boy now," Naruto said hotly, as Makoto giggled into her hand. "Foo, nay, na-chan. You'll always be my adorable little chibi," she said, ruffling the top of his head. Naruto could only pout and cross his arms, making Makoto squeal before hugging him again. His fox-like features made him look like a small kit, which he cursed on occasion since whenever he went to the Uchiha compound, Makoto would be there to greet him with a hug. It was only Makoto and Sasuke left in the Uchiha complex, save for a few other civilians and shinobi that managed to evade the Uchiha massacre. Fugaku had been slain in a brutal fashion, when Asaki Uchiha, the eldest child of Makoto and Fugaku had purged the majority of the Uchiha. Asaki had spared Makoto and Sasuke, as an act of mercy, telling Sasuke to live free, before she vanished. The civilians and ninja that were spared were mainly envoys who weren't around when it happened, as they were in other villages to sell their wares or act as liaisons between the villages, or were on vacation. When they returned, they were shocked to see the ghost town of the former mighty Uchiha. Being the widow of the clan head, Makoto was elected as the current Uchiha clan head, with Sasuke as the heir instead of Asaki, who was placed as a missing nin in the bingo books, listed as S rank. Through strenuous operations, they're slowly making recovery for their loss. However, it was soon discovered that a large amount of the slain Uchiha had their eyes removed during the autopsy, that sent the bureaucracy of Konoha wanting her head, implying that she had taken the eyes. Makoto and Sasuke knew she wouldn't, as she was crying openly when Asaki and the two met. Nonetheless, Naruto had been invited for dinner at the compound, courtesy of Makoto and Sasuke, who wanted to meet the little, Foxy-chan, and the other who wanted to hang out with his bro, respectively. It struck Naruto as odd, when he heard Asaki had done something so heinous. He remembered her that she would play with him when she was off duty from Anbu. Flashback. A 6-year-old Naruto sat on a swing by himself on the Hokage monument, after dealing with his troublesome family. Minato and Kushina had taken Naomi out for a family outing today, as it was their birthday. In a typical fashion, he was alone as they didn't bother to tell him, or rather, they didn't want him there. Naruto idly swung his feet back and forth as he looked up at the starry night. The moon looked as illustrious as it did as always, as he pulled the collar of his yukata. It was a pale blue, with white lilies as a design. His sash was loosed a bit, to allow the V-neck of his yukata to droop. Naruto continued to admire the night, as the Kyuubi festival was happening down below when he felt a gust of wind. Shivering, Naruto pulled on his sash to keep himself warm, before he felt a pair of warm hands on his small shoulders. The hands started to roam down towards his arm, before rubbing them, making Naruto relax from the menstruations. He looked up and saw a pretty pale-skinned beauty, her hair pulled into a ponytail as her onyx eyes bore into his sapphire blue, with a minute smile before her face reverted to a neutral expression. "Hi, pretty Nei-chan," Naruto said, smiling at his newly acquired sister. She removed her hands and sat next to Naruto on the swing, sitting at an angle with her legs together to lean towards Naruto. "What's your name?" "Asaki Uchiha." "What are you doing here, Namikaze-sama?" Asaki asked, watching Naruto grimace at her question. She thought she offended him, but he waved his hand. "Don't call me Namikaze-sama, I don't like honorifics or my last name. Just call me Naruto," he said, before sighing, deflating into his swing seat. A small silence passed over them before Asaki spoke again. "Okay, Naruto-san, why aren't you spending time with your family?" she asked. Naruto's eyes darkened a bit. A family doesn't leave one of its members behind, nor do they neglect them, he said quietly. Asaki nodded minutely, confirming her suspicions. Often when she was at home, Makoto would go into a tirade about how Kushina wasn't taking care of little Naru-chan, before her attention was brought elsewhere. Before coming here, Asaki did a little spying on the Namikaze family, seeing how Naruto was suspiciously absent. This only reinforced her already growing sympathy for the young blonde, as she got off her swing. Naruto heard the creak of the chains from the swing before being lifted off his seat. Asaki sat down again, with Naruto in her lap, facing her. He curiously looked up at her with a frown, before he felt Asaki run her fingers through his hair. Naruto was shocked, as all the Uchiha he knew, save for Makoto and Sasuke, were stiff, upper-crust nobles. Quite frankly, he thought they all had sticks up their asses. However, he decided to add Asaki to the already small number of Uchiha who didn't, as she rubbed his back and petted him. Relaxing, he leaned forward and rested his face against her abdomen. After a few minutes, he looked back up at Asaki, who met his gaze when she felt the weight of his head off of her chest. "Thank you, Nei-chan," he whispered quietly. Asaki nodded slowly, studying his face before smiling. Her attention was diverted to the 3 whisker marks on both of his cheeks, curious if they were scars or tattoos. They always intrigued her, as no one else had markings like that on their face, and started to run her thumbs across his pudgy cheeks. Naruto froze, his back shooting up as he felt Asaki run her fingers across his cheeks. Try as he might, he couldn't move as he felt something well up from his throat. Asaki watched in rapt attention as a wide-eyed Naruto surprised her at his sudden lack of movement. She was about to stop before she heard it. The sound that would only spell doom and gloom for Naruto for the rest of the night. Naruto purred, and it only got louder as Asaki continued to brush his whisker marks. Naruto was apparently oblivious to the sounds he was making, as his mind was turning into mush under the pleasure he was feeling. Asaki's own eyes widened as she gasped a little, her eyes getting a bit starry-eyed at the magnitude of kawaii Naruto was outputting. On her inner kawaii scale, Naruto's purring was off the charts, as she let out a very quiet squeak. Squee. She promptly tucked Naruto, a very still and complacent Naruto, who was trying to gather himself, and ran off with him under her arm, heading towards Anbu HQ. It was all girls' night at HQ, and she just had to bring her new toy. Shit. End. Makoto stopped ruffling Naruto's hair, as she placed her bag on top of the kitchen counter. Nay, Naru-chan. I'll make you dinner today, Makoto said with a closed-eyed expression, before noticing 2 foreign presences. Hitomi and Setsuna. She eyed critically at Hitomi, who whimpered and dove onto the couch at her fierce expression, and then moved to Setsuna, who flinched. Naru-chan, who are these 2? She said, her gaze lingering more on Setsuna before turning to Naruto, who laughed sheepishly. Naruto made his way around the couch, grabbing Hitomi and Setsuna by the hands to properly introduce them to Makoto. "This is Hitomi, my new imouto," Naruto gestured at the shy girl, who hid behind Naruto's leg, occasionally peeking from behind. "And this is Setsuna, my butler." He gave Setsuna a curious expression before she coughed into her hand. "My name is Yamamoto Setsuna, Naruto-sama's butler, Makoto-sama," she said professionally, bowing deeply before raising her head again. Makoto raised an eyebrow. "Ho, a new sister and a butler, Naruto," she said. Naruto noticed the lack of honorific and the use of his full name, showing how serious this was. Naruto nodded. "They're really sentient objects, but they took on a human form," he said, noticing the look of surprise on Setsuna and Hitomi further sinking behind his leg. Makoto adopted a suspicious expression, before sighing. "Well, alright, I guess," she said astutely. "But Naru-chan, you have to tell me this earlier." She whined like a child, stamping her foot. Naruto chuckled nervously. "Sorry, Ba-chan. It slipped my mind. I didn't even know you were coming over either, so I wasn't prepared," he said, rubbing the back of his head. "It's okay, Naru-chan. I can't stay mad at you for long," she said, pinching his cheek. She let go, noticing his pained expression before shooing them away. "Now, shoo, I need to make you dinner," she said, as the 3 slinked back onto the couch. "Where's Sasuke? Is he alright?" Naruto asked from behind the couch, his attention glued to a documentary on how ramen was made as Hitomi and Setsuna peeked from the top, looking warily at the Uchiha matriarch. "Oh, he's fine. He's spending the next few nights at the Harunos," she said, her eyes undrawn from chopping ingredients. The rest of the night was silent, as the chopping of ingredients and sizzling of the pan was drowned out by the low hum of the hood atop the oven, and the TV. Is it a good idea to tell her what we really are? Setsuna whispered, drawing Naruto's attention away from the TV. He saw her and Hitomi's worried expression before he mussed their hair. Ma, it's fine. You can rely on her to keep a secret, he said, as the two females sighed. She's Sky, Oni-chan. Hitomi whimpered adorably, before Naruto laid her across his lap. He tickled her tummy as she giggled uncontrollably. Now, turn that frown upside down, Imouto. Naruto said with a smile. With a pout, Hitomi removed herself from his lap and laid her head against his side. He then turned to Setsuna, and with a predatory grin, pulled her head onto his lap. Confused at the sudden interaction, her eyes went to Naruto's face, who with a smile, ran his hand through her hair. She was about to retort before Naruto placed a finger on his lips with a silent, "Shush." She relented, and rested on his lap as he continued to play with her hair. After a while Makoto called them to dinner, before Naruto had excused himself to wash his hands. Hitomi and Setsuna went to follow, before Setsuna felt a hand on her shoulder. She turned around to face Makoto with a hard expression, as Naruto and Hitomi disappeared into the bathroom and shut the door. Now, listen here and listen well. I know Naruto loves you and the other chibi dearly. Setsuna blushed at the word, love, despite having an indignant expression. But understand that if you hurt him, I will have your head. You probably know what he's been through, but understand this. Makoto went closer as Setsuna walked backwards, before her back hit the wall. With a thump, Makoto's arm shot out and struck next to her ear, earning her full attention as her eyes projected fear. I have a very particular set of skills I have acquired over a very long career in Anbu. Skills that make a potential nightmare for people like you. Makoto's hair started to cover her face, leaving only her eyes visible. A black miasmic aura started to radiate off her being, spelling death should you cross her. If you treat Naruto well, that'll be the end of this talk. I won't bother you, I won't confront you. But if you don't, I will look for you, I will find you, and I will kill you. To end her point, her eyes glowed blood red as her Sharingan spun furiously, promising sudden death. Setsuna could only nod quickly, hoping that appeasing the demon in front of her will make it go away. Just as quickly, Makoto reverted back to her normal appearance, as it never happened at all. Good. We're on the same page then, I'm glad to hear it. She said happily, before returning to the kitchen to plate up the food she cooked. Setsuna slowly slumped to the floor, her head down as the bathroom door opened. Your turn, Suna-chan. Naruto said as Hitomi followed him. Hitomi's right. She is scary, was all that was going through Setsuna's mind as she proceeded into the bathroom. After dinner, Naruto said he had to do something as he bid Setsuna and Hitomi goodbye, as well as Makoto, who made her intentions apparent when she said she'd be staying over until Sasuke returned to the compound. Naruto changed his attire to a blank white shirt and faded blue jeans, while wearing a black hoodie and sneakers made by Nike. Their slogan, "Just kill it," had always amused Naruto. Naruto started running up the wall with his chakra before jumping over the rooftops of various buildings, sometimes alternating to tree branches if there was no more building to jump over. Eventually, he reached his destination, having always visited every 2 months. The Namikaze household. He sighed as he went to the base of the building, the wall that would lead to the window to his bedroom. Using his chakra, he walked up the wall and propped open the window, and set a foot on the windowsill before he saw the 3 people he thought he wouldn't meet. Not this early. His former family. Naruto met their gazes before exhaling slowly. Well, shit. Earlier. Dinner's ready. Kushina shouted aloud as she finished adding some garnish to the ramen she was making. 3 large cylindrical pots were occupying the stove as she ladled some noodles, pouring it over with some broth and topping it off with some meat and vegetables. 3 minutes later, Minato came clunking down the stairs while Naomi practically bowled him over, shoving him hard against the railing that he fell through the gaps. Kushina tried to hold her laughter as Minato struggled to stand back up, as Naomi was already stuffing her face of the delicious noodles. Soon, the three were dining and talking animately about their day. So, Mina-kun, anything interesting happened today? Kushina inquired as she drank the broth and stood to refill her bowl. Minato sighed. The usual things, Kushi-chan. Paperwork, assigning team missions, paperwork, sending out letters to other nations, a council meeting and paperwork. Minato said cheekily. Kushina rolled her eyes. Well, you better clear up a few days for me, we're going baby shopping. Kushina cheered. Minato raised an eyebrow. For what? His response was met with a ladle to the head as he clenched the spot Kushina hit. For the baby, of course, baka. Kushina frowned. Minato rubbed his head sheepishly. Ah, Gomen, I thought you'd forget. It was already a nightmare trying to get new things for little Naomi here. She was quite the spitfire back then, ain't that right, Naomi? He ruffled her hair. Naomi pouted as Minato messed with her hair. She still is. Oh, have you found a boy to crush on yet? Kushina teased, making Naomi blush. Minato gasped. Kushina, I'll be damned if some little runt takes my only child away. Minato emphasized by slamming his fist on the table, making Kushina's bowl splash some ramen and broth on her clothes. Her eyebrow twitched. Naomi flinched, but Kushina and Minato didn't notice. Well, that won't be the case in a few months now, wouldn't it? We have baby number 2 coming along soon. Kushina patted her bulging belly. Little Haruka here is gonna be stirring up trouble in 3 months, Tte-bane. Minato smiled wistfully as he got up and embraced Kushina from behind, kissing her cheek as his hands patted her belly. I bet she'll have your little verbal tick too. Minato laughed. Kushina reddened in embarrassment. You better not have jinxed it, Tem. I tried hard to hide it, Databane. Kushina mumbled the last part, much to Minato's secret amusement. However, Kushina saw and her chakra chains started to dance behind her. Quickly, Minato bolted from the kitchen. Get back here, Minato. Kushina gave chase, leaving Naomi alone in the kitchen as bangs and girlish screams echoed from the house. She sighed. Oni-chan, Naomi whispered, making circles with her finger on the table, looking sad. After a brief stint of silence, Kushina dragged Minato back into the kitchen by the collar as he stretched his arms to Naomi. Naomi-chan. Help 2-chan. Help. He cried before Kushina bopped him again with the ladle. To their surprise, Naomi stayed silent before getting up from her seat and going upstairs. The couple paused as they looked at each other, before entangling themselves and followed Naomi. Naomi reached the top floor as she walked past her bedroom door, going to the end of the hall. Kushina and Minato followed, looking uneasy as this was something new for how Naomi was acting. Reaching a window, she turned to face the door which she knew used to be Naruto's. It was a blank door, looking similar to all the other guest rooms. Bracing herself, she grabbed the knob and noticed how stiff it was. She tried to turn it but it wouldn't budge. A seal made itself visible on the doorknob and the door itself, much to her surprise. Minato came from behind, inspecting the seals. A lockout seal and an event seal. Minato remarked as Naomi turned around. What do those seals do, 2-chan? Naomi asked as Kushina bumped in to explain. Well, Naomi, a lockout seal is a seal that's designed to prevent intruders from entering a certain area. Kushina pointed to the doorknob. In this instance, the door is prevented from opening by normal means. She moved her eyes to the event seal. An event seal, however, is something that triggers something to happen if the door was ever compromised. Kushina narrowed her eyes as she studied the seal. It was very intricate. In this case, Minato must have made this for something, but forgot about it. Kushina shook her head. What a dummy. Kushina, I didn't make those seals. Minato said, making Kushina frown. If you didn't, then who? You and me sure didn't, and Naomi is just starting her fuinjutsu. Was it an intruder? Before either one could say anything, Naomi raised her leg, pushed Chakra into her kick as the door exploded into splinters. The room was dark, save for the beam of light that came from the window, shining onto the bed. The blanket was gray as the pillow was covered in dust. The second the trio set a single foot in the house, they were being led by an invisible force toward the wall adjacent the door. What's going on? Naomi panicked, trying to regain control by squirming. I don't know, and I don't like it. Kushina was just behind Naomi, her arms flailing as her feet didn't respond to her call. I'll try to Harishan out. Shit. A barrier. It disabled by seals, but how? Minato struggled, but the trio soon stopped at the center of the back wall. A resounding crack lit up a light source on the wall behind them as it shone on a sketch. Through the use of seals working behind the scenes, it made the sketch large enough to see clearly. Is that us? Minato said as he looked at the crude drawing. It was done in crayon as it showed a blonde-haired stick figure, a red-haired one and a smaller, orange-haired one propped on one side of the paper. The backdrop featured grassy zigzags on the bottom, symbolizing grass and an obnoxious yellow sun in a corner, with a smiley face inside it. The three didn't understand until something shimmered on the other side. While the caricature of the three had smiley faces, a short, blonde stick figure had a sad smile on it. What does this mean, Minato Koi? I'm scared, Kushina uncharacteristically remarked. Being the red-hot habanero, scared wasn't in her dictionary until today. Minato could only offer silence while Naomi waited with bated breath. The next sketch was of a wooden house, barely discernible as the sketch was drawn in slightly better quality. The same red, blonde, orange stick figures were outside of the house, but the other blonde figure was looking out of what seems to be a window. They had the same faces as the first sketch. The sketches kept getting better as the drawing switched from crayon to color pencil, then to pencil to soft charcoal. Likewise, the quality improved in each drawing as more lights illuminated, each sketch depicting the Namikaze family and the mystery boy. In the sketches with pencil and soft charcoal, the sketches had accurately resembled the family, but the mystery boy always had his head and eyes shaded out, only showing the bottom half of the face. The lips were set in an eternal frown and in some, what looked to be streams of tears. The sketches also had odd numbers in a blank corner of each one. 7, 4, 5, 9, 8, 11. There were several repeats of the numbers from 4 through 11, with a few repeats of 12s. Wait, that's the time Naomi and I went to the park, and that's the time you and Naomi went to the Kyubi festival. I couldn't go because of Hokage duties, but, Minato trailed off, Kushina nodding as she remembered those moments well. They soon realized that the sketches were depicting their moments in history. As soon as I find the creep stalking our family, I'll beat the tar out of him. Kushina and Minato shared the same sentiment. It soon became odd when it transitioned to what seemed like the boy playing with a rabbit. With a crown. These sketches were drawn in soft charcoal, in high-grade material as it started from the number 6 this time. Each drawing had shown the boy smiling, albeit his top half of his head were still shadowed. The bunny seemed to at first to evade the boy in the first few paintings, however it soon gradually stopped running before gradual acceptance in the latest few. It was a few seconds before a large, circular light shone from the ceiling. It looked like the moon. The trio's eyes were drawn from the apparent moonlight towards the wood floor, where a large drawing was illuminated. It stretched the whole floor, save for the space the bed, desk and shelf were occupying. This sketch, however, was colored in. On the right side, shone a beautiful pale woman with small, noble-esque eyebrows. She had 2 horns and long, silver hair and was dressed in a Miko garb. Magatama decorated the collar and cuffs of the priestess garb as her face was turned to the left, smiling affectionately. She had a faint blush, and a crown of grand design hovering above her head. Her right hand was grasping the figure's left hand. The boy seemed to meet the same height of the beauty, dressed in expensive, high-quality clothing. However, like prior, his upper half of his face had been shadowed, but the lower half was smiling toothily and a faint blush was visible as well. On top of where his head would be, a crown was there as well, but it was of even grander design, signifying the higher position of the two. The number in the corner was 13. What does this mean? Kushina whispered. Her head was racked with thought, as was Minato's. They didn't notice the wide, misty-eyed expression Naomi had. As if answering, the lights snapped shut as they heard a flipping motion. Then, the moonlight shone on the center image. It read, Naruto. Gu. GL0S33GC. Suddenly, Minato and Kushina were assaulted with memories of their estranged son. Their eyes widened astronomically as they came to a sparking realization. No. No. No 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 no. Kushina collapsed on her knees, as Minato's face was stricken with horror, as he collapsed and started to backpedal. As they did this, each light shone again on all the previous drawings, as Naruto's name appeared in the same messy font, as if done by a paintbrush splattering on a canvas. The sketches flipped over again, except the shadowed part of the boy revealed the full face of Naruto. It stung the three, especially the ones that looked like Naruto was crying, and it got progressively worse as Naruto's sketches improved, since they captured more detail of his anguish. The final sketch, of the woman and Naruto smiling made their heartstrings twinge, before each sketch faded into nothingness. The three were silent, save for their sobs before a clunking sound came from the window. Their eyes widened when the window was pushed up and a foot landed on the windowsill. A body followed the foot, as did a blonde mop of hair. The person looked up for a few seconds, before exhaling loudly and muttered something. Well, shit, omake. The girls were talking about how their day went in the Anbu HQ. Strictly speaking, the women of Anbu had this certain HQ locked in for their girls' night out. The male Anbu were relocated, as for their own safety since angry women spelled certain doom for anyone who came at an inopportune time. Especially when it was that time of month for some. I swear, Yuta and Rika should get together already. Yugo exclaimed. Her lower half of her body was underneath a low-rise table, where there was thick, fluffy material hanging from the already short table as a plate of snacks covered every inch of the table. They're so cute, especially Rika, with the eye patch. Anko shared her sentiment, as she sat adjacent of Yugo. She rested on her side as a pillow supported her elbow, supporting her head as she watched the large television. Maybe I should get one. PFF'd. Don't be ridiculous, Anko. I remember, when we were kids. You were a Chunobu too. When you came to class dressed in a black ninja outfit and said that you were, and I quote, beware, peasants. Mystic Shadow Nin, Mitarashi Anko shall protect from the shadows. Because you thought the Anbu before were cool. I couldn't stop laughing. Yugo remarked, snickering when Anko blushed, before kicking Yugo from under the table. You Urasai. That was only a year in school. She blushed in embarrassment. Ma, it's okay Anko. I thought it was adorable. Kumiko Nadashi comforted Anko, rubbing her back in silent support as she smiled. She had a braided hairstyle with innocent eyes and a pale face. Ha, that was the funniest shit I've seen all year that time. You had a red scarf wrapped around your mouth and everything. Aika Sudendo laughed, nudging Yugo with her elbow. She had a tan complexion, with sharp eyes and pouty lips. Anko was about to unleash hell when the door suddenly slammed open. The four Anbu snapped to defensive positions when Asaki stormed in, closing the door with her foot with Naruto in tow. He had fallen asleep at some point. What's up, Asaki? Why do you look like you've found Konoha's eighth wonder of the world? Yugo asked, her eyes drifting to Naruto's sleeping form. And who's the runt? He's Yondaime-sama's son, Naruto. Asaki said, while laying him in her lap. Huh, he looks like a cutie. Anko remarked offhandedly. Why's Naruto here then? Aika gasped. Asaki, you didn't kidnap him, right? She said with a faux shocked expression. Asaki-san, I expected better. Stealing a little boy, look at how innocent he is. Kumiko crinkled her eyebrows, her eyes showing disapproval as she frowned. No, I didn't kidnap Naruto. Watch, Asaki said loudly, before shing them and motioning them closer with her hand. Raising eyebrows, the four leaned in as Asaki maneuvered her index fingers to Naruto's cheeks. Look, do you see these markings? They look like whiskers, right? Asaki said giddily. The four raised an eyebrow before look at each other, nodding slowly. When I rub them, he purrs. Asaki said, her eyes gleaming as she slowly moved her thumbs over Naruto's whisker marks. Her eyes sparkled as they touched his cheeks, and she started to brush them horizontally. What a crock of shish. Wait, what? Aika was about to call Asaki out, before she heard a guttural noise from the tot. He's actually purring. The foo, Anko was about to finish, before Yugo shoved her hand in Anko's mouth, her eyes never leaving Naruto. He continued to purr, much to the five's delight. Isn't he adorable? Asaki said, as the other four Anbu crowded around Naruto watching with fascination. However, Naruto only amplified that feeling when he turned around, making grabby motions with his hands. His hands landed on Asaki's clothes and he pulled himself in, snuggling to them as his legs kip up into his belly, and his hands bent, like a fox. All of the Anbu, save for Asaki, squeaked in delight, as their kawaii meters shot out of the roof. Anko started. So. Kumiko with the assist. Damn. Aika. With the pass. Cute. Yugo. With the slam dunk. The other three joined in the shout, as they poured over Naruto. Look. He's waking up. Shish. Asaki harshly whispered as Naruto started to stir. He looked up, meeting 5 pairs of eyes as he blearily made out the faces. So many pretty Nei-chans, Munya, Naruto sleepily said as he smiled, going back to burying himself into Asaki's soft clothes. There was dead silence, before the group broke out in whispers. Asaki, I think you really have found Konoha's 8th world wonder. No, Konoha's greatest world wonder, Anko said, her eyes wide. Weaponized cuteness. Yugo said, her eyes sparkled. That's dangerous, Asaki. It made me break character. Aika replied, her hand over her face as her irises shook in their sockets, shocked by the effect the little runt had. He's just like a fox. Kumiko gushed, bringing the whispers to a dead halt. Just as sudden, Yugo dived out the window and ran, heading towards the marketplace. The other four didn't notice as they were entrapped in Naruto's purring, before Yugo came back 5 minutes later. With a plastic bag. Girls, I think I may have the weakness to women in my hands. Yugo said ominously, as she kneeled with the bag. What? As if he wasn't already. Aika asked, too engulfed at Naruto. Here, watch, Yugo set the bag down, before opening it. PJs. Anko said as she grabbed a panda one out of the bag. Asaki was too busy, being a mother hen at the moment. Full-body animal PJs. They were available at a flash sale at the festival today. Yugo fished out a certain orange one, which drew the other 4 ANBU's attention due to its bright color. Yugo smirked deviously before unfolding it, revealing a fox PJ. It had the pointy ears on top and 9 tails at the bottom, a hole for the face and a zipper on the side of it. Asaki quickly snatched it, boring her eyes into each of the 4, her Sharingan spinning. This is truly the greatest thing to come to Konoha. Asaki said wisely, the other 4 nodding sagely. We must use this at once. Asaki said, before the 5 started to fantasize at the imagery. Quickly, the 5 had nosebleeds. 10 minutes later, armed with a video camera, tissues and other items, the 5 Anbu returned to a sleeping Naruto. Earlier, the 5 had cleared out a room with its furniture, having prepared the room that covered the floor in mattresses. The 5 were dressed in their nightwear, each sporting some pretty racy lingerie as they came to retrieve Naruto. Carefully treating him like glass, they diligently made their way to the room and set him softly in the middle. The bag of pajamas sat in a corner, as did a large bag of snacks. A TV stretched the wall as the 5 sat around him in a circle, giggling. This is the best night ever. Yugo pipped, much to her support of her fellow Anbu. Quickly, the five stripped Naruto to his boxers, blushing slightly as they thought of how much a bad time this'll be if someone were to see five ravenous young women stripping an adolescent. Shaking it off, Kumiko unzipped the fox pajama before Aika had put Naruto into it. Successfully putting Naruto's arms and legs in, as well as his face without waking him up was an achievement in itself, as Asaki zipped the zipper. The five stared in awe as Fox Naruto laid asleep, curled on the soft cushiony mattress. All the while, being videotaped. The five were now debating who gets to pet him. Picking straws, the order was decided as Aika, Anko, Kumiko, Yugo and Asaki, much to her dismay, and before they could break, Naruto started to stir. The five froze as Naruto sat upright, rubbing his eyes from the crust sleepily, as to their infinite fascination the fox ears on the pajamas seemed to twitch and the 9 fox tails dance, as if they had a mind of their own. How does he do that? Kumiko whispered, but didn't get a response. The five's cuteness meters were already blowing up. MMN, Naruto mumbled as he saw 5 young women look at him adoringly. The video camera was left forgotten as it recorded every interaction. Who are you? Are you my new pretty Nei-chans? Naruto said. Hearing his voice amplified the drunk-on cuteness expression the girls had on as they approached. Dia, Aika said, much to the shock of her colleagues. The cold-hearted, tough-as-nails Aika, reduced to this. The other 4 thought as Aika pawed her way to Naruto and picked him up. She smiled gleefully as the now fully awake Naruto looked in confusion at the lady. Anyo, nice to meet you, Nei-chan. I'm Naruto, what's your name? Naruto said, complete with head tilt. Aika squealed and pressed Naruto into her already large cleavage as she hopped in joy. Can we keep him? Can we? Aika asked excitedly. It was decided then and there that Naruto was the mascot of female Anbu everywhere. Everywhere. The night was then filled with debauchery, as the 5 girls drowned themselves in eternal bliss. Naruto was being manhandled by 5 women, each trying to earn his affection. Naruto eventually had been swapped through many animal costumes. Baby bear, panda, cat, dog, squid, which brought many shivers of insane sensual pleasure up their spines, and a plethora of other animals, doing each of their respective sounds. The camera got a good amount of solo shots of Naruto being babied and being cute, and before they knew it, the 5 were tuckered out. So was Naruto, who was back in his fox outfit because it was too cute to not put back on. Naruto started to get sleepy again, and as he started to go to sleep on the mattresses that were strewn about, the 5 ladies positioned themselves around Naruto. Anko and Aika had claimed his arms whilst Kumiko and Yugo snuggled into his legs. Asaki had the honor of acting as his bed as she was underneath Naruto. The 5 simultaneously giggled perversely, and the night was over. The next day, Naruto woke up back at his apartment penthouse in his usual clothes, and decided to wash up, wondering if yesterday was a dream. That was quickly dashed away when he went to the hamper to switch his clothes, when he noticed a black Anbu mark on his arm, and what appears to be a seal inside the tattoo. Using his chakra, Naruto made the seal release what it held, and out came a picture. It was Naruto, sleeping in his fox costume as Aika, Anko, Kumiko, Asaki and Yugo smiled into the camera with peace signs. It was embroidered with hearts and teddy bears and on the back, it read, "To our adorable Otuto, always welcome to the female quarters of Anbu." There were 5 kiss marks on the back. Naruto smiled, and framed the picture and resealed it back into his arm. Just a typical night in Konoha. Naruto grumbled as he laid on his bed. The sun was shining brightly through the draped window, where small beams of light managed to slip by the cracks and shine on his face. Yesterday was pretty hectic night, even for him. A lot of drama and emotional words were exchanged, but things were settled. For now, at least. As yesterday night's events assaulted Naruto's memory, he sighed and ran his hand across his face before propping his head. After sitting, Bleary-eyed on the bed, he rubbed the crust out of his eyes and swung his legs from out of the tangled mess of his bed sheets and headed towards the bathroom. Upon entering, he noticed the rings around his droopy eyes as he sighed. Given, things stretched well into the night to the point where the sky started to get lighter, Naruto drank in the time he had. Which wasn't much. Thank Kami Minato had rescheduled the start of the academy to the start of the afternoon and an early dismissal at 3 p.m. An extended orientation, so he says. Slowly, his arms rose as he leaned over the sink, turning on the faucet to wash his face. After patting down with a towel, he started to brush his teeth before someone had knocked on the door. Naru-chan, are you alright? It was Makoto. She had stayed the night. Yeah, I'm fine. Naruto curtly replied before he spat the toothpaste out and rinsed with cold water. Refreshing. It's noon, why aren't you at the academy yet? I made you lunch too. She said from the door. Minato had to change the time for today so the other students who weren't there for the first orientation can get a crash course today. Naruto said, a half-truth. He didn't want her to bring up the topic of his parents so early in the morning, as her tirades tended to last for well over the needed time. Well, alright then. When you come out, make sure to eat the lunch I made for you, alright? I have some errands to do and I'll be back before nightfall. See you later, Naru-chan. Makoto's voice faded before a door slammed shut. Sighing, Naruto changed his wardrobe before leaving the bathroom, hunkering down over the curry rice Makoto had pleasantly made for him. It made him smile. Ooh, Naruto. Only I'm allowed to feed you. Ah, the rabbit goddess has awoken, I see. Naruto said. With a poof, a featureless shadow clone appeared next to Naruto before tendrils of whitish gray pierced the clone before taking the shape of a busty woman with horns. Immediately, Kaguya had glomped Naruto off the chair, luckily having put the fork down during that instant. It would be a shame if he was injured by a kitchen utensil. Ha, this smell, Kaguya breathed deep as Naruto tried to push her head away. His hands magically slipped away like oil as she pressed her face into the crook of his neck. The smell of my Sochi, my Naruto, she breathed deep, getting drunk on his scent as Naruto could feel his already minuscule chin hair being cut down by her horns. Naruto had the sudden thought of the Usagi no Megami as a bull in an arena and he as a matador, waving around a red cloth as the woman charged and lodged herself onto the side of the arena. Naruto snorted, before his attention was drawn again to the hungry-looking Kaguya, their faces inches away. I need more of this smell. Kaguya demanded as her nose pressed painfully onto his. I can't get enough. She snarled before she was met with a swift chop on the head. Settle down, Ka-chan. Naruto deadpanned, as Kaguya crouched on the floor, massaging the lump that had grown in the middle of her horns. It really hurt. Ooh, Sochi, why did you hit Ka-chan? She whimpered, giving him doe-like eyes. Well, as much as she could. She didn't have any pupils, so really it just looked like she had tears in her eyes. Naruto shook his head as he massaged her scalp, making her purr as she playfully nuzzled into his hand. Again, he felt his already minuscule arm hair being reduced to near nothingness as her horns sliced dangerously close to his skin. Why? Kaguya eventually let go, letting Naruto grunt as he tried to get back in his chair and eat his food. Are you relaxed now, Ka-chan? You do this every time. Naruto said in an annoyed tone, but there was a hint of playfulness in his words. But it's so intoxicating, Na-chan. Kaguya responded before kissing his forehead, making him blush faintly. Okay, fine. I got it. You can stop now. Stop. Naruto raised his voice, as Kaguya had kept kissing him on the forehead. What turned to an affectionate gesture turned to something lewd as there was now a wet spot on his forehead. With a wink, she vanished in a poof, revealing the clock behind her. Oh shit. I got 5 minutes to get to the academy. In a mad dash, he shoveled the rest of Makoto's curry before blinking away in a white flash, as chimes played on his exit. Naruto reappeared on the roof of the academy as the sound of chimes played on his appearance. Naruto blew a breath of relief as he wrenched open the door and made his way to his homeroom. He pulled the sliding door apart as he was greeted with a room full of chattering students, future shinobi in the making as an overall jolly mood washed over him. Naruto moseyed on over to a window seat near the middle left of the room. Before any of his non-blood brothers and sisters could approach him and say hello, Iruka and Minami walked inside, getting their attention. Okay everybody, settle down. Iruka said loudly, but everyone ignored him. Guys, be quiet, Iruka said a little louder, yet to no avail. Minami was snickering in the background. Reaching a boiling point, Iruka shouted. Everybody sit the hell down and shut the up. Cue big-headed jutsu. Minami was openly laughing as the kids all rushed to find seats available in the room, leaving an empty seat next to Naruto. Nay, Iruka-kun, you scream louder than me when we're in bed. Minami said, smiling and making her eyebrows go up suggestively. Iruka blushed as he sputtered. Nami-chan, that's hardly appropriate at the moment. Iruka said, helpless. A few of the kids earned a blush too as Minami winked at Iruka. Taking a minute to gather his bearings, Iruka cleared his throat. Alright, I'm starting roll call. Say here or present if you're here. Iruka started as he looked at the attendance sheet. After it was said and done, it appeared that Naomi was the only one not present. Naruto mentally filed that away as he laid his head on his arms, resting on the table as he stared at the board. As you all know, Iruka started. The academy is geared toward making you shinobi hopefuls into the future of Konoha. Iruka gestured to a box next to the podium he was behind. As such, Hokage-sama had graciously supplied us with these handbooks to better your understanding on what the academy wants and gives to its future shinobi. Minami, who was leaning on the wall, had passed the books around to each of the students before sitting down on a chair. Now, if you turn to page 2. Naruto's thoughts decided to linger at this point, his interest all but lost. He idly remembered the empty seat next to him and the events that happened yesterday night. Flashback. Well, shit, Naruto said bluntly, snapping the three out of their trance. With his presence known, Kushina all but launched at her baby boy, effectively tackling Naruto and her out the window. A thought quickly passed by Naruto's mind as he felt the lack of support underneath him. My life. Kushina could care less. On the other hand, Minato and Naomi scrambled off their position on the floor to peer out the window when a small hand clamped tightly on the windowsill with a fierce grip. Looking down, Naruto was dangling from the window as Kushina balled into his small frame. Get a grip, Ka-san. You're gonna make me fall. He shouted as she sobbed louder. My son, he's yelling at me. BWAAAAAAAAAH. She wailed, crying loudly into the night. Minato and Naruto briefly made eye contact before they sweat dropped. Naruto started to lose his grip as a finger slowly detached from the window when Minato and Naomi hauled both the mother and son from their disposition. Kushina still clutched at Naruto's body, like a mother hen protecting her young. Except, this hen was practically crushing her son's ribs as Naruto struggled to breathe. Don't. Just stand there. Help. Naruto gasped out as he felt Kushina tighten up. URK. After a fierce tug of war with Kushina threatening to rip the arms off of anyone who would take her Sochi away, the two finally detached the clingy mother from her estranged son. In a rebound, Kushina decided that if she couldn't have her Sochi, she'll settle for her Masumi, and latched onto Naomi instead, shoving her head into her bust as she whimpered, resting her head on top of Naomi's. Quite frankly, Naruto had matched Kushina to a red chihuahua before it was stashed away in the depths of his brain. Taking a breath, he normalized his condition before readjusting his position and stood. He went for the door before glancing back. I'll be downstairs. Until then, get yourselves in check before we talk. And the door slammed shut. After a few minutes, the fractured family were seated in the living room. Naruto sat in a chair facing the other three that were seated in a sofa. So, who wants to go first? Naruto asked, breaking the silence. It was thick as neither one made a noise. Minato was sweating, Naomi was looking downtrodden, and Kushina was busy blowing her nose and dabbing her eyes. She decided to go first. Naruto, my Shan, Kushina said as her words failed to work with her as she was crying, her voice filled with congestion. Naruto's sweat dropped as she continued. Showy dat we forgot all about you. She said, blowing her nose. Minato rubbed his temples. Leave it to her to be tact about a sore topic. Ish washed on purpose, honest. She exclaimed, flinging a bit of mucus across the room. Gross. Naruto sighed, nodding minutely. I know, I understood that. Naruto said, making Kushina smile before blowing her nose. I've always known that Naomi took priority over me, she has the Kyuubi inside of her, after all. Naruto said curtly. Naomi flinched, feeling slightly responsible for his situation. But you got to understand, that being neglected for years will have a negative effect on me. Naruto said, making the three look at the floor in shame. I don't even want to mention the jabs you all gave to me when I was younger. Naruto said, disappointed. It's traumatizing for a kid to see their family gang up on them because of one reason or another. Naruto turned his gaze locked onto Kushina. I remember when you told me about your time as a child in Konoha, Ka-san. You were called a tomato and didn't have any parents to take care of you. Kushina's eyes welled up, before Naruto locked onto Minato. Same with you, too, San. You were orphaned and only caught a break when you and Ka-san got together. Minato sniffed. Naruto then set his sights on Naomi, who fidgeted under his scrutiny. Well, I actually have no comment about you. You didn't know any better. Naruto said, waving her off, which quite frankly pissed her off a bit. Still, it hurts. Naruto said, putting a hand over his heart. I haven't forgiven you. Naruto said, making their expression crestfallen. But, Naruto said, offhandedly. There's always a chance to make up for it. He said, looking out the window. Kushina was about to jump before Minato forced her to sit back down. Grunting, Naruto rose from his chair. Show me your resolve. Show me your motivation, and prove to me you deserve my forgiveness. Naruto laid down an ultimatum, before vanishing in a bright light. With Naomi. Naomi was curled around her pillow as she laid on the bed, thinking about what happened. She felt her heart feel weird when she saw Naruto with those two other girls that one afternoon. Her heart ached when she saw him today, and the eye-opening epiphany when she saw witness to the spectacle in his room only drove the nail in that she missed him. She missed Naruto dearly. Feeling a pressure on her eyes, she buried her face into her pillow as she gripped it tightly, not wanting her parents to see if they were to come in. Oni-chan, she thought, her mind going away into her mindscape as her throat felt dry. Inside her mindscape, the Kyuubi was shaking her head, feeling her container's sadness before devising a plan. Unbeknownst to Naomi, the Kyuubi was set on influencing her container by releasing chakra in a certain part of her brain in the meanwhile. I miss Oni-chan. Naomi thought sorrowfully. I'm sorry for the things I said, I'm sorry that I hurt you, I'm sorry, Oni-chan. She felt herself tear up more. Kyuubi decided it was time to crank up the chakra output on that certain area of Naomi's brain, seeing her vulnerable for the instant. I have to make it up, it's my fault he was forgotten, Naomi thought, before she felt a small fire in her stomach. I'll earn Oni-sama's forgiveness, if it's the last thing I do. With a goal in mind, Naomi's eyes burned a small, yet fierce fire as she set out her plan. Kyuubi only snickered into its paw, seeing her gears of her plan start turning. I'll just keep putting small amount of my chakra into Naomi's brain center for love. We'll see how this pans out. Ha 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 ha. I need a hobby, the Kyuubi thought, as the night slowly turned into day. End flashback. Naruto was well asleep when a certain orange-haired girl walked in. Sorry, Iruka-sensei. Ka-san wanted me to finish breakfast before I left. She smiled before being waved off by Iruka. As she made her way up the steps, she spotted Naruto looking tired as heck, which she presumed was because of yesterday. She pulled the seat out, the scratching noise making Naruto open his eyes and notice her. He gave a weak wave. "Hello," Naruto said, drowsily. "Come on, it's do or die, Naomi. Act now and act swiftly." The Kyuubi goaded, as she watched with bated breath. She didn't pour her chakra into Naomi's brain for a little meet and greet. Seeing her chance, Naomi, who still hasn't taken her seat and obliviously to the fox's machinations, shook Naruto's sleepy body. "Erg, what do you want? Do you have questions about what happened yesterday?" He mumbled, yet still audible to everyone. He moved his upper body to sit straight up, straightening out his clothes. "I thought we settled everything last night mph. Naruto, whose sleepy disposition now changed to alertness as a set of lips met his. The remainder of the class that weren't watching were watching now with wide eyes as Naomi was kissing Naruto dead on the lips. And, what the hell is that soft thing prodding his lips? Iruka dropped his handbook while Manami had a blush staining her face. She also had a small, yet fairly obvious lecherous smile. Hehehehehe, she giggled perversely in the background. Click went the camera shutter as she stashed the camera and slipped the Polaroid into her pocket. Naomi continued to press her lips onto Naruto as she slowly descended into his lap, her eyes never leaving his wide cerulean ones. Meanwhile, the Kyuubi was pushing more of its chakra into her brain, all the while cackling at in her cage as her 9 tails danced behind her. Naomi placed both of her arms around Naruto's neck as she pressed harder into her kiss. It's too much. Naruto panicked as he was slowly being whittled away by the soft feeling on his lips. She tasted like strawberries and a bit of ramen broth. His eyes started to droop a bit, the sweet sensation slowly overcoming his mind. Kaguya, being the ever-helpful Mother Goose, did nothing. Because she was asleep. Shit. Oni-sama, Oni-sama, Oni-sama. Naomi on the other hand chanted his name in her mind, endless amounts of dopamine slowly filled her brain. If it were a bucket, it would be overflowing. Getting a little bold, she started to grind into his lap before he snapped back into consciousness and pushed her away. Naomi released Naruto as she slowly pulled away, a trail of saliva connecting their mouths. Pua. Naomi panted slightly as she licked her lips, loving the taste of Naruto's lips. That's my resolve, Oni-sama. Naomi declared, blushing all the while Naruto looked bug-eyed at his little sister. I'll capture your heart, if it's the last thing I do. She shouted, before sitting on the empty seat next to him and turning away with a huff. Quote. EHHHHHHHHHHH. The class erupted in chatter, as the scandalous scene in front of them made send lightning bolts down Naruto's spine. Naruto's brain took a mental reboot as it promptly crashed, deleted all of its saved data as Naruto's 1.184.937 was wiped from his head. Defeated, he slowly slumped down in his seat, burying his face in his arms. Naruto felt his peaceful life around him, crashing down like a million shards of glass. Me. Naruto said, muffled into the table. The academy was amiss, as its usual calm, studious aura that was emitted turned to drama as all the kids that were released back into the wild were chatting animatedly about what happened between Naomi and Naruto. Naomi was blushing atomically, a new shade of red as she hid under her desk when 3 p.m. arrived. Naruto had promptly dived out the window to avoid the masses. As such, we find our blonde sitting on a tire swing, as it spun slowly in place. I can't rightly look at my little sister in the right way anymore, how did her resolve become earning my heart? Naruto was having a war in his brain, as chibi Narutos were attacking the images of Naomi kissing him earlier in a mad dash, yet they kept coming in endless numbers. Where the hell were they coming from? From the shadows, a horned woman giggled. It was too much for the chibi Narutos, as the images had surrounded them before attacking themselves, spawning chibi Naomis that glomped and kissed the everlasting life out of them. A burst of smoke erupted from the top of Naruto's head as he blushed, before shaking his head to rid himself of those thoughts. He idly drifted to the sensation on his lips, remembering their soft yet firm texture. That was my first kiss too. He looked up to the sky, as if the clouds had the answers. He finally saw the appeal of looking at clouds were now, and mentally scheduled an appointment with Shikamaru to take a few hours to lay down and do nothing. In the Nara compound, a pineapple-haired male sneezed, startling him awake before smiling, and went to his calendar and circled a Saturday before returning to sleep. Naruto sighed, before letting go of his grip and fell face first into the dirt and stayed there. The grass smelled nice today. It was well after 5 p.m. as Naruto was dishing up some ramen. He applied at Ichiraku's when he noticed that they could use a hand, as Kushina and Minato would often come to eat here. And what better way to have your business boom than have your village's leader be a patron? Well, get a poop ton of money, but that's besides the point. As such, Naruto was hired on board along with a few others, as the shop was moved into a restaurant space, and soon went from rent to ownership of the building. After business was so successful, a second floor was cleared for space, and the rest of the remaining floors were turned to one side civilian and one side shinobi housing. Pretty smart. Anyways, Naruto was garbed in a black t-shirt with a white bandana tied over his hair as an apron wrapped around his body. He was in the middle of placing some tonkatsu on some colored noodles in pork broth, layering a couple of slices on the side before adding some diced bamboo shoots, a spoonful of corn, and topping it off with thinly sliced nori, seaweed, as he slapped the small desk bell. "One tonkatsu with bamboo shoots, up!" he shouted from behind the counter as a civilian got up and nabbed the bowl, leaving the proper amount of ryo as she left. With a huff, Naruto exhaled, fanning himself with a paper fan as he observed the happy customers slurping up his creations, and still a great sense of pride. "Oi, Naruto, how's the heat?" Ayame asked from across the room as she placed a bowl of ramen onto a tray as a waiter took it upstairs. "I tell ya, Ayame, rush hour is absolutely ridiculous, but seeing the customers smile when they dive into it makes it all the more worth it," Naruto said with a smile. Ayame giggled into her hand before a few more customers came through the small hanging curtains. "Welcome to Ichiraku Ramen, may I take your order?" Ayame, with her feminine wiles, made the men of the restaurant, save for Naruto, swoon as she took their orders. Sighing, Naruto shook his head at her antics as he turned around to tend to the broth, dropping in some chicken bones in the chicken broth when he heard the squeak of the stool behind him. "Welcome to Ichiraku's, what'll be your choice of ramen today?" Naruto said, turning around to face the last person he wanted to see on Kami's green earth, for the day. "Hello, Oni-sama," a shy-looking Naomi said, rubbing her arm as she blushed, looking half at the floor, half at Naruto. With a sharp intake of breath, Naruto's mind went into overdrive as sweat poured from his face, slowly sliding down his cheek and into his shirt. Hello, Naomi," he said, nervously before Naomi gestured with her head outside. With a quick look, he saw Ayame nod at him before doing a shooing motion at him, and with her approval, went out and towards the back into an alleyway with Naomi trailing behind him. Huffing, Naruto looked at Naomi, who found her toes very interesting. "All right, Naomi, what's up?" Naruto asked, sending her a questioning glance. He got a bad feeling about this. "It's about, earlier, in the academy when she blushed, before making hand gestures. You know." Naruto raised a hand, stopping her while nodding. "I understand. It's about the kiss." Naruto finished, blushing faintly. Naomi nodded, as a minute or so passed. Naruto was starting to get curious. Why wasn't she talking? So what did you want to talk about the kiss?" Naruto prodded, making Naruto blush a little harder. "I liked it," Naomi muttered under her breath, as she unknowingly got off the side of the wall she was leaning on. Her mind was in a haze, and it was all due to a sneaky little fox. Naomi was fidgeting as she rose her head, her eyes matching his. Naruto was a little put off by her facial expression. if one could say, he felt a large amount of panic down his spine. I have no comment. Naruto said flatly, scratching the back of his head with a raised eyebrow. That only made the feeling in his spine increase, as if he had just committed a heinous crime and stepped on stage for a public hanging. Naomi had put on a face of what seems to be a rough interpretation of determination as she took another step forward. The already narrow alleyway seemed narrower as the space between him and escape grew smaller, as she was approaching him at an angle. She took another step as he bolted down the alley, hoping that there would be an exit on the other side. Running quickly, he powered through the twist and turn of the buildings as it didn't seem to lead him to the other side of Ichiraku's, more like the middle of the buildings surrounding him. That was proven true as he turned the corner, coming into an interesting sight as a small park came into view. Well, one might not call it a park, it literally consisted of a circle of stone perimeter that was a little elevated from the ground as a large sakura tree grew from the middle, with grass filling in the area. Benches were lined along the elevated stone and against the buildings of what Naruto thought to be a smoking zone. Looking around, he realized that there were no openings and the way he came from was the only entrance and exit. A fierce shiver shot up his spine as his torso clenched up, a foot falling onto the smooth stone. Clack. Whipping around, Naruto noticed the proximity of his face and Naomi's, who had her hands clasped and had an amorous look directed to him. Naruto quickly walked backwards, his back hitting the base of the tree as Naomi retained the distance, their bodies mere centimeters away. A furry fox cackled maniacally at the turn of events and continued to get to work. "End now, Naomi. Let's end, not get hasty, right? End now." Naruto started to panic, his arms extended trying to push her away before she slapped the downwards, shooting both of her arms out as her hands landed beside Naruto's head. Or rather, into the tree as she enhanced her hands with chakra as her hands were now embedded into the wood. "Oni-sama," Naomi said, a touch of seductive undertone could be heard as she leaned close. "Shit. Not Agai mmmmmph. Naruto was silenced as Naomi's lips met his for a second time. It started off quick and sloppy, before she readjusted herself and skillfully ed his face, for lack of a better term. Should any bystander see, one might remark that they look like two lovebirds who confess their undying love to each other. Naruto could do nothing but be at his little sister's mercy as his mouth was agape when she kissed him. Bad move. Naomi, as she basically cleaned his tonsils, ed on his lips before diving into his mouth with her tongue, wrestling with his. She had pulled her hands out of the tree as she wrapped Naruto into a hug, deepening the kiss. Naruto could feel her budding, yet still very present press against his chest, and he found it highly disturbing that he was secretly enjoying it. Try as he might, he couldn't resist as a small trickle of blood flowed from his nose, onto his lips. Naomi got a little dicey, not thinking at the right frame of mind as she let the blood from his nose slip into their kiss, as she lapped up Naruto's saliva and blood, enjoying the coppery taste. The worst part of this was that Naomi's eyes bore into his cerulean ones, and if he could properly make out, hearts were just faintly visible in her eyes. Naruto's body went slack as his legs gave out, his body sliding off the tree and onto the grass. Naomi, with the grip of a professional wrestler, didn't let up at all as she fell with him, gravity working in her favor as she practically had coiled her tongue with Naruto's. He was too lost in forbidden bliss as his eyes rolled to the back of his head. Naomi, who was now laying on top of Naruto, unclasped the hug and moved up to his neck, while she brought up one leg near her chest, her crotch on top of his as she unknowingly grinded into it. Naruto unconsciously moaned into the kiss, sending sparks into her loins that made her a little warm between the legs. After a minute, Naruto came back to life as he felt the something soft and warm on top of him, to snap back to the kiss. Another few minutes passed before Naomi had her fill, and stopped her movements, going back to simple kissing as a large strand of saliva connected their mouths. Hungrily, she used her hand to cut the strand and wrap it around her finger, before sticking it in her mouth, savoring the taste. With a pop, She pulled the finger out as she straddled him, Naruto's mind going blank. Wah! Naruto whimpered in a low voice, before Naomi's other hand shushed Naruto. Kissing him on the cheek, she whispered into his ear. I love you, Oni-sama. I'm sorry for everything, but I love you. I love you more than the world, more than Ka-chan and Tu-chan, and more than me. She said, nibbling his ear as she nuzzled his neck. Naruto could do nothing but stare with an apathetic expression, being too tired for this shit and gave up. Sighing, he ran his fingers along her long hair, making her purr before she planted kisses on his neck and jaw, kissing his lips again before pulling away. She smiled, which Naruto thought was cute as she lovingly spoke the words with a ton of conviction behind them. I love you, Naruto. And in a dash, she got off of him and ran out of the area, leaving him alone to his thoughts. Shit. In his mindscape, a small orange orb made herself known as it floated wispy-like as it found the older, sleeping Naruto. It laid next to him on the heart-shaped bed before glowing brightly, taking the form of Naomi, as she curled and snuggled into Naruto's arm. As if in a dream-like state, the older Naruto turned his body and brought her closer into his, her head buried into his chest and his own into her flowing, orange hair. His blonde locks in her orange ones made it look like the sun had given birth to two children, as a breeze brushed by and danced across their skin. Kaguya, who was busy at the moment, had returned to find her spot taken by Naomi and pouted, before smiling a tad and pulling out a clipboard. On it was a piece of paper with various names on it with a box next to it. Her name was on it too, with a checkmark in the box. Looking down, she found Naomi's name before checking it off. Harem member number 1, get. She said, before throwing the clipboard into a portal. Omake. It was time for bed for little Naruto. The day had been long and boring with nothing to do. It was 8 p.m. as Naruto finished a painting of his family, before splashing his name on the back and setting it firmly on a wall with a seal. Eyeing the piece, he nodded, before putting his crayons away. Yawning, Naruto clambered into bed and put the covers over his body, slowly falling into the abyss of dreams. As he was falling into dreamland, a gust of wind blew past his window, before a small clank hit the shingles. On the outside of the Namikaze compound, a hunched, distorted figure leaned against the wall as it creeped closer to the window. Using its toes, the figure flexibly put one leg on either side of the window frame, before crouching in a half stance, its hands going to the base. With little effort, the figure lifted the bottom half of the window, before doing a few hand seals. The figure's hand glue a light blue as it thrusted into the window, a small shattering sound coming from the outside. It had just broken the only barrier between the mystery figure and Naruto, who had turned around in his sleep to face away from the window. Quickly, the figure swung in and landed softly with a hand stretched on the floor, balancing on its toes. Whipping around, it quickly shut the window before standing fully erect. With a clap of the figure's hands and a silent mumble, the once invisible figure changed into one of color. Shapely legs, a round rear and sizable chest revealed Ika garbed in stereotypical ninja gear, dressed in black. Her fiery red mane was dulled by the moonlight, as she undressed and sealed her clothing into a seal tattoo on her arm. She was now dressed in lingerie, black lacy bra and matching panties only enhanced her features, not to mention her tan skin made her look like an Amazon goddess. Walking on the balls of her feet, she made her way to the prone Naruto, and with a quick action, slid into the bed with Naruto. She sighed in content as she became the big spoon, Naruto the little spoon. Despite the lack of space, she was happy, spending time with the love of her life. The thoughts that paraded through her mind was too much for her to handle, as her mind conjured an image of her, the 20-year-old Anbu and an 8-year-old Naruto, running through a field of flowers in slow motion, before both of them fell on their sides. The Ika in the dream was laying on her side, with her arm propping her head as the same could be said about Naruto. She got bold and leaned in, her lips tantalizingly close to claiming her love's first kiss before she was violently ejected from her dream, blood dripping down her nose. Banishing the thoughts, she snuggled into Naruto and was about to sleep in peace, before she heard a rattling. She turned her head and saw a figure come from the same window she did, before she undressed as well and stepped into the light. The sight, quite frankly, pissed her off. A wild Kumiko had appeared. As she was dressed in blue lingerie, matching her blue hair, and stealthily walked towards the bed before she was kicked away and pressed against the wall by Aika, a look of pure fury adorning her beautiful features. Not wanting to wake Naruto, she used her Anbu hand codes to communicate. "What the hell are you doing here, Kumiko?" Kumiko smiled before using her hands. "I came to sleep with Naru-chan. He was just too adorable to leave alone." She smiled a toothy grin, which made Aika ease up a little as she had to agree. His cuteness was too overwhelming for the two. Aika nodded slowly, before relaxing her grip and making hand codes. "Alright, fine, you can sleep with me and Naruto, but you better make the bed bigger. This twin-sized mattress isn't gonna support the three of us." Nodding, Kumiko made hand seals before touching the ground with her fingers and started to trace the air. In a matter of seconds, Kumiko, using her draw-release, skillful tracing, had set the shape of the bed and made it bigger, while channeling her Doden affinity as exchange. Now that the bed frame was twice as large, she unsealed a queen-sized mattress and placed it down. Reason why she had a queen-sized mattress was because she found distaste in sleeping bags, so she carried a comfy mattress for overnight missions. Using her draw-release again, she connected the twin and queen-sized mattress and it fused into one large mattress, and the two shifted Naruto in the middle, Aika and Kumiko claiming his arms as pillows and side in content. As they were about to sleep, the two heard a noise and sat up, prepared as two beings shifted from the shadows outside and seeped inside the room. The shadows grew until they were banished away, revealing Yugo and Anko, wearing purple and red lingerie respectively. Aika growled a quiet yet menacingly, getting their attention as their eyes were wide. The two were about to talk before Kumiko used Anbu hand codes to tell them to be quiet. Naruto was sleeping. Eventually, the quartet were facing each other, as if in a standoff. "Why are you two here now? I could make do with just Kumiko, but you two made it all the more difficult." Aika signed. "Hey, don't you be yelling at us like that." Anko signed aggressively. "Last time I checked, Naruto belongs to all Anbu, not exclusively to you, you hothead." Yugo retorted, making Aika angrier. Kumiko tried to be the voice of reason, trying to calm her down, but the three weren't paying attention, so she tried harder. In the end, the four were violently using Anbu hand codes to throw insults at each other. It looked like four people in a dance-off to see which one was the better dancer, before they heard the bed squeak from strain. Naruto was twisting and turning, as the blanket had been directed to the floor and was about to get up before the four jumped. Aika and Kumiko claimed Naruto's small arms while Yugo and Anko claimed his legs, and the fighting stopped as Naruto relaxed and went to sleep. That could be credited to the fact that his limbs were firmly secure in 4 different sets of S, but I digress. The four made eye contact before nodding once, and drifted to sleep with their living teddy bear. Meanwhile, Asaki was crying waterfalls as she was stuck at home, acting as the secretary for Anbu Commander Dragon, who was hiding behind her chair, rubbing a gloved hand over a picture frame of Naruto smiling toothily. She hugged the picture frame to her chest, and Asaki could swore she heard an audible squee. It didn't take long for Naruto to stumble back into his penthouse apartment as he tripped over the door, falling face first onto the welcome mat. As the door hit the adjacent wall with an audible bang, Naruto groaned as he ate some of the rough material the rug was made of, before grunting, lifting himself up with the help of the door knob. "Naruto, honey, are you okay?" Makoto appeared from the kitchen, carrying a plate of food with a concerned expression. Naruto waved her concern off as he took a deep breath. "Naomi kissed me, Obaa-chan," Naruto said bluntly, rubbing his nose with a delicate finger. "Well, That's nice, honey. Make sure to treat her well. Makoto replied, before sitting down on the couch with her now identified plate of cookies as she turned on the television. It took 0.1 of a second for Naruto to blink before a plate full of cookies impacted his face as the stray plate sliced the television in half with frightening strength, embedding itself into the wall behind it. She did what? Makoto yelled so loudly, the windows shattered as it was blown into the street, luckily not hitting any stray passers-by. Makoto's face was already taking up Naruto's field of view as her Sharingan spun wildly, morphing into her unique Mangekyo Sharingan, memorizing every contour and expression the now frightened Naruto made as he was backed against the closed door. Naruto could see that the top half of her face was shadowed by her midnight hair, and it didn't help that her Sharingan seemed to glow red, making her seem like a demon as a black miasma surrounded her body. Naruto panicked in his usual fashion, waving his hands in front of her in an attempt to calm her down. Please. Naruto gave up, curling up into a ball as Makoto hovered over Naruto's form. Kaguya, seeing her beloved son and mortal in danger, used her quick wit to give Naruto a chance of surviving. It may not have been the best plan of action. In a puff of smoke, Naruto's form was enveloped in a misty fog as Naruto underwent a change. Makoto's eyes quickly cut through the mist, her eyes trained over Naruto's before she gasped aloud. As it seems, Kaguya had managed to make the situation worse, as he was now outfitted in a bunny costume. Pure white, with two floppy bunny ears that were currently standing at attention, along with paws that Naruto's hands and feet were currently occupying. To top it all off, a small, white bushy tail decorated the behind, shaking a little due to Naruto's own vibrations. Makoto could only coo and squeal in delight as her Mangekyo recorded the event, scooping Naruto into a massive embrace as they rolled around in the carpet. As Naruto suffocated into Makoto's sizable bust, he could only be trapped under Makoto's arms and soon passed out. It didn't take long for Naruto to regain consciousness, as he awoke in a start in bed. He glanced around the room, regaining his sense of familiarity before he released a breath he unknowingly held, flopping back onto the mattress. It was night, from what he could tell from the color of the sky. Turning his head, he glanced at his alarm clock, the cancerous green numbers reading that it was apparently 8:32 p.m. Tired as he was, Naruto's other bodily functions commanded him to get up, as he swung himself out of the sheets. Slipping on his immaculate bunny slippers, he blearily walked to the window, wrenching it open to let the musty air to flow outside, welcoming the cold breeze before he trudged through the apartment and locked himself in the bathroom. As he was doing his business, he noticed that he was hungry and made a note to take care of that. Unbeknownst to him, a shadowy figure darted between the trees outside the complex. The figure dived behind a hedge as it crawled on all fours, using chakra to stick low. A lone night guard of the complex passed by, before the figure darted to the side of the building and started to climb. Using the ledges as positions to climb, the figure confirmed their suspicions as its eyes noticed a seal. The seal was meant to sound an alarm in the security office in the building, to notify that someone was using chakra as a means to enter the complex. If their chakra signature wasn't synced with the building's own database or residents or visitors, every guard in the immediate area was to surround and capture the individual. As such, the figure climbed higher, easily passing 8 floors before reaching the penthouse suite. The figure saw the open window and using it as its chance to enter, launched through the opening, successfully entering the apartment. It took Naruto a while as he finally left the bathroom, rubbing his sleepy eyes while yawning at the same time. Arching his back, a satisfying pop racked his body in pleasure before he slumped, waddling towards the kitchen. Taking out a plate, he realized he was feeling a tad more famished than he thought, and took out some lettuce, tomatoes, some slices of ham and turkey and some refrigerated bacon. Popping the meat products into the microwave, He set it to 15 seconds as he slowly dragged his hands over the vegetables, laying them across the pieces of bread. Kami, this is great. Naruto, not quite in the proper mindset, remarked as he finally assembled 2 sandwiches, and bit into it. He made his way to the couch as he sat, idly noticing that the TV he had was replaced with a bigger and newer one. Shrugging, he idly munched on his sandwich while watching the TV. Can I have that other sandwich, Naru-chan? Orika said from the other side of the couch. The now identified Sanin was garbed in a cotton purple t-shirt, with matching jean shorts and black slippers. Her long hair reached her mid-back as she pointed a pale white hand at the other sandwich. Naruto nodded, unaware as the hubby Harem scooted closer to Naruto, grabbing the sandwich as the duo watched the TV. Sometime after finishing the sandwich, Orika took off her shirt as the bread crumbs stuck to the fabric, revealing a black tank top that showed a large amount of cleavage. The shirt was discarded to the side as Naruto droopily leaned against Orika. Yufufu, Naru-chan has become such a fine young man. Orika remarked, dragging Naruto into her bust as she put her legs onto the couch, positioned in a way where Naruto's head was comfortably seated in between her as she stroked his hair. Nay, Naru-chan. Orika said, stopping her movements, making Naruto whine a little before rotating his body 180 degrees. Smiling, Orika kissed him on the lips chastely. I love you, Orika said affectionately, before Naruto nodded, his head falling back onto her chest. Muffled, Naruto replied, love you too, Snake Lady, and with that, Naruto had dozed off, blissfully unaware to their exchange. Smiling like a mother would, she placed a quick kiss on his forehead, before picking him up and going to the bedroom. As she laid onto the bed, she placed Naruto beside her, and cuddled with her teddy bear. Her nose was buried into his sunshine hair, breathing in his scent as the two wasted the night away in their dreams. It was morning, as Naruto opened his eyes. His mind felt confused, as he swore he remembered talking to someone yesterday night. Deciding not to think too hard on it and chalking it up to just being tired, Naruto remembered that today was the day he'd been waiting for. The team placement for Budding Academy Ninja, as they transition into Rookie Genin. Excited, Naruto shouted into the air in anticipation and got set on getting ready for the day. The Shinobi Academy was buzzing with activity as those in the graduating class talked amongst themselves, going over who their senseis could be or who'd be in their squad. Kiba and Shino were in a corner, talking animatedly as Akamaru slept on the desk. Shikamaru, Ino and Choji were in another, as Ino fumed in her classic fashion after Shikamaru beat her in shogi, whilst Choji was watching over eating from a bag of chips. Sasuke, Sakura and Hinata were near the front, Hinata and Sakura berating Sasuke as he looked away, flushed. From the corner of his eye, Naruto spotted the one person he wasn't that excited to meet with. Naomi. As Naruto shuffled into the room, Naomi's eyes tracked him like a hawk as her orange hair bobbed with every swivel of her eyes. Almost making a frown, he sat in the middle row of the room, next to a window. As he stared outside, an unnoticeable poof of smoke appeared on Naruto's lap as a small, fluffy white rabbit appeared. Idly, he stroked the little fluff with his free hand as it snuggled into the appendage, its ears twitching periodically. Pretty soon, the room became quiet as two people could be heard talking outside. A male and a female, if the voices were any indication. As the noise increased in volume, it was identified to be an irate Uruka and a teasing Minami. Why'd you have to bring that up in the break room? Uruka shouted indignantly, as to which Minami's response was a giggle. Why, Uruka-kun, I thought you weren't afraid of telling the world what we did in bed yesterday night. Minami teased, as to which Uruka sputtered. It was in the moment, Minami. Uruka countered, to which Minami laughed out loud as the duo entered the room. I sometimes wonder who wears the pants in the relationship, Naruto thought as Uruka walked towards the podium, Minami standing to the side. Clearing his throat, Uruka set his clipboard down. Alright, class. Congratulations, again, on making it to Genin after years of hard work, some more than others. Uruka said, making a point to stare at Kiba and Shikamaru, who waved his comment away. Shaking his head for a moment, Uruka continued. As much as it pains me to see you go, it's time for you shinobi hopefuls to move on, and serve Konoha with pride, and the will of fire burn brightly within yourselves. Uruka said, proudly. Oh yes, you sure showered me with your will of fire last night, Uruka Koi, Minami said, a perverted smile on her face. The class gained a perverted blush as Uruka sputtered, bopping Minami on the head. Minami, please, can we not do this now? Uruka begged. Naruto made a mental note to try to wear the pants in any future relationships he might have in the future. Two people in the class sneezed, before rubbing their nose. Tee-hee. Alright, let's get this over with. Minami said, stepping in before squeezing Uruka on the cheeks for bopping her on the head. As I call out your names, please remember your team number and the name of your Jonin-sensei. Minami said, as she rang out the names on the list. Quote. Team 5 consists of Shikamaru Nara, Ino Yamanaka, and Choji Akamichi, assigned to Jonin-sensei Asuma Sarutobi. As she finished, Asuma walked into the room and gave a wave, making the trio get up and follow him out of the room. Team 6 consists of Sakura Haruno, Kiba Inuzuka, and Shino Aburame. Your Jonin-sensei will be Kurenai Uehi. Likewise, Kurenai appeared and beckoned for the three to follow. Team 7 consists of Naruto Namikaze Uzumaki, Naomi Namikaze Uzumaki, and Hinata Hyuga. Your Jonin-sensei will be Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze. As she finished, Kushina appeared in a water shunshin, grabbing the three and warping away. Just as she did, Naruto caught the fate of his best friend, Sasuke. Sasuke Uchiha, you have been assigned under an apprentice to Anko Mitarashi, by your mother Makoto. May Kami rest your soul to be fated with that woman. The three reappeared on the rooftop of the academy, after Kushina's flashy entry. The three felt a little dizzy, before finding the rooftop to be solid again and sat down. Hello, my adorable Genin. Are you ready to embrace the shinobi world? Kushina asked, giddy to take on a Genin team. She was dressed in Anbu-styled gear, but dyed red to match her hair and sleeves. This was her first time doing so it was safe to say that she'd take a mother hen approach to this one. The three nodded slowly, still not adjusted to having traveled speeds faster than their minds can handle. Sans for Naruto, but that's just a little tidbit. Well, let's start with introductions so we can get this over with. With a nod, Kushina placed a hand on her chest. My name is Kushina Uzumaki Namikaze. I love my family, Naru-chan and Naomi-chan, ramen, family history and gardening, as well as cooking. I dislike people who have malicious intent to harm others for no reasons, rapists and pedophiles, the like. My dream for the future is to reconnect with someone I lost that's precious to me. Kushina concluded, sparing a glance at Naruto. Although his face was blank, he was glad she was making the effort to make amends. I'll follow up, Hinata said, before shifting her weight and clearing her throat. My name is Hinata Hyuga, daughter of Hiyashi Hyuga, the main branch clan head. I like my family, especially Hanabi and Neji Ni-chan, cooking and pressing flowers. Hinata paused, tapping her index finger to her chin to think. I dislike perverts and those who have no morals. My dream is to unite the branch and main branch families together. She concluded, confident with her answer. Moving on, Naomi started. My name is Naomi Uzumaki Namikaze. I like ramen, my family and Naruto-kun. Naruto looked abashed, rubbing the back of his head as Naomi sneaked a couple glances at him. I dislike perverts and being yelled at. My dream for the future is to. Naomi trailed off, a blush started to form on her face. Kushina raised a delicate eyebrow, silently nuding Naomi to continue as she stared. Realizing she was backed in a corner by the stare of her mother, Naomi started to shout. My dream for the future is to start a family with Oni-sama. Naomi concluded, a bit of the Kyuubi's influence leaked into her voice. The group was dead silence as Naomi panted, getting it off her chest. Naruto looked away with an atomic blush, as Hinata looked slightly taken aback. It wasn't uncommon for clan members to procreate with relatives, she just didn't expect the 4 soon-to-be 5-member clan of the Namikaze to have already gotten to this step. Kushina looked wildly surprised, glancing at Naruto who looked away and started coughing into his fist. Properly embarrassed, Naomi sat back down and after a few seconds, laid down on the tiles of the rooftop. Ahem, Naruto decided to cut in, to somewhat ease the tension. My name is Naruto, Naruto Uzumaki Namikaze. I like ramen, painting, gardening, playing instruments and taking walks at night. My dislikes are arrogant and ignorant people. My dream for the future is to protect my precious people. Naruto finished, having looked away as he finished. Alright, Kushina said, gaining the attention of her future genin. Coughing into her fist, she scratched the back of her neck. Well, as interesting as your introductions are, I think it's best we move on. Naomi blushed again, as Hinata and Naruto nodded. As per tradition, as senseis are to impart a certain tidbit of information before we can take a team on to become genin. And that is, that only 3 genin teams can be made with today's batch of kids. In wartime, the Shinobi Academy cranked out every graduating student with a Hitai-8, a pack of shuriken and kunai and immediately sent them to the battlefield. Kushina spoke, as the 3 listened in attention. Since we aren't in wartime, we have made a certain rule. Regarding teams and the amount of shinobi we're, at max, allowed to promote to genin. Hinata raised a dainty hand, asking a question. But sensei, didn't we all graduate from the academy and become genin? She asked, curious. Yes, in some cases, but really, you didn't graduate at all. This raised the attention of the trio. As I said, we're, at a max, allowed to promote a certain amount of academy shinobi into genin. As per a recently added clause after the Third Shinobi War, only a third of the graduating class is allowed to become shinobi. If the amount of teams exceed that percentage, the excess teams are put into reserve for 6 months. After that, they'll be officially be integrated as genin and all as well. The reason for me explaining this to you is to ease your fear if you pass the genin exam that I have set up, and not be immediately be sent onto missions. Taking a breath, Kushina continued. In the case of the teams that are put into the reserves, they will live together to kindle friendship and enhance their teamwork, whilst being under the tutelage of their jonin sensei. The only difference between reserve and shinobi is that active shinobi have more experience, while reserve shinobi have more downtime. Nonetheless, they are all genin. She concluded, seeing her students nod their heads in understanding. Clapping her hands, she decided to move on. Alright, now that that's over, let's get to the genin test that I have prepared. As she said that, she got up and walked to a training field, the 3 following. As the 3 racked their minds to prepare for what may determine them from active shinobi, they stopped as Kushina stomped her feet. Immediately, a large totem pole rose from the ground. Climbing to about 7 feet and 3 feet in width, Kushina approached the wood totem pole, that was decorated with many faces of animals like an owl on top, a boar and a tiger. She touched each segment, channeling a bit of chakra, and in a burst of color, the totem pole went under a dramatic change. The top segment, the owl, changed into water yet still retained its shape. The boar turned into fire, the tiger into earth, and the last one, the dragon, turned into wind. The genin test I have for you is to make a totem pole with each of the elements in these scrolls. They're D-ranked jutsu, so you should have no problem with the task. Just make the totem pole look like mine. With that, Kushina stamped her feet and an identical-looking totem pole sprouted a few feet away from the one Kushina had. You have 3 hours to do it, time starts now. With a clap, a clock emerged from her palm and she set it to 3 hours, the time already ticking. Quickly, The three dived for the scrolls and ripped it open, eyes brushing against the contents. Kushina looked amused as she watched Naomi and Hinata trade scrolls, each memorizing it. As she looked at Naruto, she was surprised to see him only take a second glance, before making hand seals and performing the jutsu in rapid succession away from them. Deciding to test his mettle, Naruto got started on the totem pole. Fuden. Wind. Naruto exclaimed as a gust of wind hit the totem pole. The bottom segment lit up as wind took the place of the dragon. Running through another set of hand seals, Naruto let out another shout. Doden. Earth. As a chunk of the earth rose and hit the tiger segment. Immediately, the tiger turned to rock, but it crushed the dragon underneath, leaving the pole only 3 segments tall. Naruto's brain immediately made the connection, as he noticed that Hinata and Naomi finished on reading the scrolls. Kushina stomped her foot as the totem pole rose again, replacing its missing segment as Naruto conversed with the two. Guys, the test is about balance, Naruto said, gaining their attention. Earlier, when I tried to do 2 of the bottom segments, the earth one flattened out the wind one. Naruto finished his analysis. So doesn't that mean we have to reinforce the wind segment? Hinata asked. Naruto nodded, motioning to Naomi. It's also about making sure the water segment doesn't wash out the fire one as well. I can presume that the fire and earth one won't conflict, as they're neutral, but we'll also have to make sure that the fire won't turn the earth to hardened earth and make it heavier. Naruto sat and thought. Glancing at the clock, he realized that about 45 minutes had elapsed. Oni-sama, we don't necessarily have to start from the bottom, do we? Naomi asked. Naruto thought about it, before nodding. Can't we start from the top and go down? We haven't tried that way yet. She asked, as Naruto nodded again. Standing up with the other two, Naruto decided to place Naomi on wind and Hinata on water, and he'll handle the fire and earth aspect of the totem pole. Hinata decided to start, shooting out the water jutsu in the scroll. Sweden. Water. Hinata shouted, and water from her palm hit the top segment. Just as quickly, Naruto shot a fire jutsu. Kaden. Fire. The fire jutsu hit the bore segment, and he could already see the water start to overtake the fire. Thinking on his feet, he shot another jutsu, with a tad bit more chakra. The effects managed to work out, as the fire jutsu flickered and pushed the water back. It wasn't perfect, as the water was still slightly washing away the fire, but it'll have to do. Naruto then shot the earth jutsu. Doden. Earth. The earth rose once more as it hit the tiger segment, turning it into earthy rock. Naomi followed up with her wind jutsu. Given that Naomi was the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Yoko, and didn't have training from her Biju, she pumped a lot of chakra into the jutsu unknowingly. Fuden. Wind. A gale of wind hit the dragon statue, but it started to buckle. With the same mindset as Naruto, she shot another wind jutsu at the pole, reinforcing the dragon segment. However, this time the wind started to buffet the earth segment, by starting to tear into the rock, the fire segment, by blowing the flames out, and the water segment, shooting the water away. Naruto clicked his tongue against the roof of his mouth and taking a shot in the dark, released a fire jutsu. Kaden. Fire. As the fire jutsu hit the fire segment, the totem pole started to buckle less before finally it stabilized. The three smiled in accomplishment as Hinata and Naomi sweat from the effort. Naruto cracked his back as 2 identical totem poles stood proudly, before being smashed to bits by an ecstatic Kushina. Her 2 fists outstretched, she clapped in delight just as the clock rung, signaling the end of the 3-hour test. Congratulations, Genin of Konoha. You figured out the test. Kushina smiled brightly, as the trio high-fived each other. As I overheard, the test is indeed about balance. As you may have noticed, the earth segment crushed the wind one, and the wind one started to mess with the other segments. Also, good thinking on your part, Naruto. Water is weak against earth, fire is weak against water, earth is weak against wind and wind is weak against fire. For the sake of this exercise, I excluded lightning, which is really strong against earth and weak against wind, but enough of that. The totem pole was built by the trees that were raised by our Shodai Hokage, Hashirama Senju, so it stood well against the jutsu. The reason lightning was excluded is because it wouldn't affect the wood to the extent and purposes of this exercise. Kushina took a breath. The balance test is used to show that certain jutsu and stronger than others, which brings me to my next point. Fishing around in her pack that was tied to her leg, she pulled out 4 pieces of plain white slips of paper. These, my little genin, she channeled some chakra into the slips. The paper became damp, before being slit down the middle and crumbling to dirt. Or chakra paper. These will tell you what elemental affinities you have. Crumpling the paper away, she threw it behind her, knowing that the earth will reclaim it naturally. If it's wind, it'll be slit down the middle. Fire, it'll burn. Water, it'll become wet. Earth, it'll turn to dirt, and lightning, it'll crumple. As you can see, I have 3 affinities. A major water one, with wind as my second, and lastly earth as my least strongest element. With this combination, I can use the Uzu bloodline, which allows me to make whirlpools, our namesake bloodline. Kushina smiled cheekily. The 3 watched in attention as Kushina continued. She handed out the paper to each student, and instructed them to channel their chakra into the paper. Hinata had a water affinity, as the paper turned damp. Naomi had a wind and water, as the paper first split in half before turning damp. Naruto, however, left her in major shock. As Naruto channeled his chakra, the back of the paper turned black as the front turned stark white. It remained that way as Naruto looked up, taking in Kushina's expression with a tiny bit of amusement. That's a first, Sochi. Kushina remarked as she took the paper from Naruto's hands. She flipped it over, taking a good look at the dark black and bright white of the paper. Before she knew it, her eyes focused in as she could very faintly make out a tiny split down the paper as it turned wet, crumbled, turned to fire, became earthy and crumpled at the same time. Nay, Naru-chan. I suppressed your 5 affinities so that your light and dark ones will stand out. Since if I unlocked your Rinnegan and enhanced Byakugan, it'll only attract attention. Kaguya spoke from inside her mindscape. Naruto nodded slowly as Kushina got over her surprise. So, that's a first. Kushina chuckled. I can work with Naomi and Hinata, but I can't help you that much, Naruto, Kushina said, slightly disappointed that she couldn't take the first step to reconnect with her son. Naruto waved her concern away. It's not that bad, Ka-chan. I'll figure something out, Naruto reassured. Kushina smiled at Naruto not being annoyed or something of the sort and released a breath, before dismissing her students. Be back here tomorrow at 9. You're dismissed for the day, Kushina said, as the 3 bowed. Naruto stretched his arms as Hinata bid goodbye to her other teammates, going back to the way to her compound, leaving Naomi and Naruto alone. So much for a first day of being official genin, huh, Naomi? Naruto asked, turning around before he was met with hungry lips. Instantly, Naruto felt the earth from his feet disappear as Naomi fell down on top of him, kissing him passionately. Oni-sama, she breathed, before kissing him again. Naruto tried to push her away, only for her hand to crash next to his head, traces of the Kyuubi's chakra running through it as claws dug into the earth. Giving up, and saving himself from feminine fury, he relented by kissing her back. This is a disaster, Naruto thought. They were siblings. Yet, he couldn't find it in his heart to deny his Imouto from kissing him. It was the first time for him that a girl took initiative and kissed him outright. Sure, he had fangirls that oozed like an amoeba over him, but there was something worth protecting about Naomi. Was it because she was his sister? Or was there something more underneath in his own budding feelings for her? Naruto's thoughts were cut off as Naomi released him from her lips, panting as she gazed at him. Oni-sama, she moaned erotically, as she straddled him. Naruto felt something twitch inside of him as he felt a certain pressure on his crotch. He quickly scrambled from underneath her, making her fall backwards. Sorry, Naomi, I have to go. As he said that, Naruto scrambled and ran off towards his apartment, Naomi watching his retreating figure. Oni-sama. Q, she moaned, as very faint hearts appeared in her eyes. Her thoughts drifted away as the Kyuubi giggled. In the mindscape, the Kyuubi sat in front of a large console computer with large wires running from it. This was the source of Naomi's emotions, the hub for her mindscape. Although the Kyuubi couldn't directly influence Naomi's actions, she could plant seeds into her mind. As the screen reflected what Naomi saw, the Kyuubi cackled and made suggesting imagery appear in Naomi's mind. Images that consists of Naruto in her vessel, sweat, a messy bed and a very happy couple. Idly, Naomi thought about something of love nectar, but decided not to dwell on it and quickly made her way back to the compound to relieve herself in her room. Naruto groaned loudly, falling down once again on the rough carpet as the door slammed against the wall, it eventually hitting his head as it rebounded. With a muffled, ow, Naruto got up as he closed the door. When he turned around, he was greeted with a sight that made him shout with excitement. It was his previous sitter, if you could call it that. Orika, the missing nin and one of the Densetsu no Sanin. Orika Ne-chan. Why are you here? Naruto exclaimed as Orika greeted Naruto in a big hug, silently pushing Naruto into her sizable S and blushing at the sound of his voice. I'm here to stay for a while, Naru-chan. She said, blushing a little more at the affectionate name calling. Naruto smiled as he returned the hug and gripped her a little tighter, before releasing. Does Tsunade-bachan or Ero Sennin know you're here? Naruto asked, which Orika shook her head. This is a private vacation for me, Naruto-kun. I know I used to visit with Tsunade and Ero Sennin. She snickered at the nickname, before continuing. But, the two are very busy right now so I decided to drop on by. Although your godparents couldn't make it, your god sister could. She said, squeezing Naruto's cheeks with a giggle as Naruto batted her hands away, blushing. His cheeks were always a sensitive area for him. It didn't help that he remembered when he was younger, when Izumi and the other Anbu used to dress him up in little costumes. He could have swore he saw some other Anbu he didn't know of, some of them had different outfits and went by different names, like Bolt, Sand, Rock and Seas. It also confused him greatly when he saw them sign a document. He could only make out a few words and sentences, something to the effect of, Naruto, honorary Anbu, or, mascot of all shinobi black ops. He didn't quite understand it, even to this day. But that's enough of that. Naruto cheered when Orika told him she'd make him some of her signature ramen, and Naruto gave her a big hug. I love you, Orika ne. Naruto shouted, before bounding to his bed to change out of his current clothes. As Naruto's door closed, Orika sunk in a pile of mush, her snake-like body allowing her unnatural amount of finesse and flexibility. She smiled as her heart beated harder, her fantasies running wild. I feel like a housewife, cooking for her husband after a long day at work, Orika dreamt, as her mind drifted to her romance manga she had at home. The trope of the housewife further, pleasuring, the husband made her blush and giggle pervertedly, before springing back in place when she heard the bedroom door open. Ne-chan. Let's play after the ramen is done. Naruto spoke as he bounced on the couch, turning on the TV. Orika hummed in delight, as she got to work on the ramen.